A newspaper columnist prepares his latest article. He's an expert on politics and military affairs. He's published over 75 articles in 2.5 years, reaching audiences in more than a dozen West African countries.
Here's a person with a francophone-sounding name who seems to be a legitimate profile, published in a legitimate paper or online news site.
But there's a problem. The articles are not written by the man whose name appears in the byline. Al Jazeera's investigative unit found that the reports are part of a shadowy propaganda campaign in French-speaking Africa.
And this particular one is very interesting. The argument is that you've had the French special forces in place for decades, and the security situation has not improved. It gives the impression that they are an occupation force.
The I unit follows a trail of clues that lead to a man with a history of manipulating truth, from Africa to the United States. It uncovers a world of deception, where names and images of the dead are used to create false identities.
L'auteur, il s'appelle Grégoire Cyril Dongobada. Qui c'est?
Ah là, ça a été, on est vraiment tombé dans un piège énorme, énorme.
After years of declining revenue, smaller media outlets throughout West Africa developed new ways of funding their business.
Vous avez un tournoi de football, par exemple, ou bien vous avez creusé un forage que vous voulez offrir aux populations. Vous nous invitez, vous dites, venez parler de ça. Et nous, on vous dit, OK, on va venir, mais il faut que vous supportez les charges pour que nous puissions arriver là-bas.
Like many media around the world, news platforms in Africa work with sponsored content. Articles funded by companies who want to advertise their products or services.
Nous sommes dans un milieu qui est très difficile parce que c'est un pays où les partenaires ne courent pas les rues.
Quand tu n'as pas ce flux important, tu n'as pas d'annonceur. Tu n'as pas d'annonceur, tu n'as pas d'argent. Tu n'as pas d'argent, tu ne peux pas payer l'électricité. Tu ne peux pas payer l'eau. Tu ne peux pas payer les salaires des journalistes.
These paid articles do not always promote products. Some of them discuss current affairs. Al Jazeera's I unit examines hundreds of articles published in Burkina Faso and elsewhere in West Africa. They cover regional politics. The name of one writer keeps coming up: the political and military analyst, Grégoire Cyril Dongobada. According to his social media, Dongobada is a political scientist and military observer from the Central African Republic, now based in Paris. Dongobada's articles are critical of French involvement in the francophone countries of West and Central Africa. He focuses specifically on the country's presence in the Sahel, the region just south of the Sahara Desert.
France wants to maintain France-Afrique, which is the political system whereby colonial France keeps all its former colonies in check so that they can loot and milk the country of its resources. If we make an assessment of the sources of France's wealth, natural resources, where they're all sourced and everything, we know. And France admits that without Africa, their economy will collapse. On the other hand, the African countries are not happy at all, and they want to level the playing field. And what happens is the countries are always broke. They just want to get the benefit of what is due them.
Dongobada's articles are critical of one aspect of French involvement in particular: the presence of French soldiers in the Sahel region.
France has what they call a bilateral defense agreement with all these former colonies, whereby France will station its French special forces in each country. You've had the French special forces in place for decades, and the security situation has not improved. It gives the impression that they are an occupation force.
The thing with the French system is that it was out of touch. It was telling people that everything's fine when people could see that it's not fine. France tried to control an area the size of pretty much Europe with a force of 10,000 men.
The I Unit finds that Dongobada's articles, along with news reports quoting him, have appeared in at least a dozen countries throughout West and Central Africa. Most of these articles focus on France's role in the region. The volume of his output, along with references to him on Google, was to reassure editors that he was a seasoned and reliable columnist.
Voilà, c'est un intermédiaire qui nous l'a fait parvenir, qui a dit, voilà, j'ai telle personne qui a telle information. Est-ce que tu as vérifié? Oui, j'ai vérifié, tu peux me faire confiance. Et donc, sur la base de la confiance, on publie.
Oban Koutel is a journalist who publishes one of Togo's news websites.
J'ai fait des recherches sur lui. Il paraît que c'est un observateur qui est centrafricain. Donc, je n'ai jamais eu de contact direct avec la personne en question.
The I Unit's examination of Dongobada finds troubling signs. The so-called analyst appears out of nowhere in February 2021. There is no record of his education, no sign of him being connected to think tanks or universities, and no employment history. An analysis of the pictures used by Dongobada on social media leads to a troubling discovery. Dongobada has the same face as a man buried during a funeral in the Central African Republic. Inside the coffin is the body of Jean-Claude Sendioli, a school teacher. His former students commemorate him on Facebook. Sendioli also worked as a referee for the Central African Football Association. His name was featured in FIFA's obituary list of 2020. Dongobada's social media and articles began to appear only months after Sendioli passed away.
The idea here is this is a legitimate person. They've created an entire background for him. They've given him a Twitter account. They've given him a new name. And you look at this and you say, okay, he's got 2 ears. This looks like a real person. And we're going to trust this. This must be someone who actually exists.
Nous avons trouvé M. Sendioli. Et en plus, M. Sendioli, il est mort.
So someone, whether a state or a non-state actor, is using the identity of someone who's died to do their own, propaganda.
But who is really behind this propaganda campaign? Al Jazeera obtained WhatsApp messages between a media organization and a middleman who approached several websites to publish articles by Dongobada and other fake journalists. This middleman is Oban Koutel, the Togo-based journalist who himself published some of the articles.
Good evening, sir. My name is Oban Koutel, Togolese journalist and owner of the website togomedia24.com. I would like to know the conditions of publishing an already edited article on your website.
What is the nature of the article?
Current affairs, politics.
Okay, we will have a look, and if it aligns with our editorial guidelines, we will publish it.
Okay.
The editor notices that something is missing.
Article not signed.
Ah, I'm sorry. Grégoire Cyril Dongobada. Military observer, researcher in political studies.
On était intrigué, disons, par une série d'articles publiés par Boué et d'autres. L'auteur, il s'appelle Grégoire Cyril Dongobada. Qui c'est?
C'est des, comment l'appelle-t-on? C'est des particuliers qui travaillent avec nous. Donc, nous, on a été contactés par un intermédiaire où, comme je l'ai dit, quelqu'un peut publier sa thèse de mémoire, une observation qu'il a, sa tribune. Voilà, on l'appelle souvent des tribunes. Donc, c'est des gens qui publient des tribunes à notre niveau.
Good evening, my friend.
Hello.
It has been a while. I have an article for you. The client agrees with 50,000 West African francs.
Coutel then sends him proof of payment, equivalent to about $85 US.
Well received.
This is a cut and dry information laundering technique. They're going to trust that here's a person with a francophone sounding name who seems to be a legitimate profile published in a legitimate paper or online news site, and they're likely to take that at face value.
Et l'intermédiaire, qui c'était?
L'intermédiaire, si je ne peux pas vous dire c'est qui l'intermédiaire, c'est parce que c'est une question de confidentialité, c'est une question de source de nous. Également, c'est pas une possibilité, mais c'est pas possible de vous dire.
Our investigation shows that Coutel was an intermediary who approached journalists to get Dongobada's articles published.
Et il vous paye pour la publication?
Oui, comme je l'ai dit. Ça veut dire que s'il veut passer une information, on regarde et puis on passe la publication.
It shows how vigilant we all need to be in the digital era to understand who is writing to us, why they're writing to us, where they're coming from, who might be paying for it. Some people are just going to feel fatigued by all of that, knowing that so much fakery is out there.
To identify the client Coutel spoke about, the I-Unit examined the metadata in the Word documents Coutel forwarded. Metadata are tiny bits of information attached to each file on a computer. They can reveal details that are hidden, such as when a file was created or who created it. In this case, the metadata revealed the word title, written in Cyrillic, the alphabet used in Eastern European countries such as Russia and Ukraine. Then something else stood out. In one of the files in the Last Saved By column, there was a series of seemingly random numbers. The string of digits appeared to resemble a telephone number that started with the number 7, the country code for Russia.
Russia's MO for a long time has been to identify fissures or grievances in society, which post-colonialism and post-colonial distaste for the West has been one in Africa for a long time, and to really tear at those fissures, to tear the fabric of society apart.
Russia's attempts at gaining influence in West Africa are at odds with France's goals.
Russia and France are natural competitors in those regions because Russia is vying for the areas that France occupies or has occupied.
France has made it quite clear that they will prefer African countries to deal with them rather than Russia. Actually, sometimes they have warned, don't make room for the Russians, deal with us instead.
The population of those countries are tired of the existing socio-economic model. They don't see it working for them. And because no one's seeing results, the discontent grows. Of course, Russia uses this discontent, and it uses this discontent to further its economic interests. Russia is not trying to make client states out of the Sahel countries. Russia has no interest to do that, nor actually the capacity to do that. We're interested in making money. And because we're interested in making money, we can offer more like generous terms to those African nations that the French are suggesting.
Al Jazeera has discovered that in 3 years, more than 200 articles have been published as part of the Russian campaign, using at least 20 different names. Each of the countries where those articles appeared have seen an increased Russian presence. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have seen coups d'etat that brought in governments that look more favorably on cooperation with Russia.
Russia has used false amplifiers, fake accounts, before, most notably in the US election, but also in Ukraine. The idea is to give the guise of grassroots support to the pro-Russian viewpoint. And in this case, it's a viewpoint that probably many people in Africa agree with. In the post-colonial world, it gives them a bit more legitimacy.
Everybody does that. It's called building an influence network. For anyone who is familiar with how this influence campaign in Russia itself are ran, this is nothing special, nothing new.
To find the owner of the Russian phone number in the metadata, we enter it in a caller ID app. These apps show the name of the caller, even if that number is not in the phone's address book. One can also search for the registered owner. When we enter the Russian number, a name shows up: Seth Boampong. The name is Ghanaian. So how did it end up in a document linked to a Russian propaganda campaign?
Because the social media platforms are looking for ads purchased in rubles or fake accounts created by Russia, Russia has had to launder its disinformation. It has had to pay middlemen and individuals to ensure that that information gets out there.
We enter Seth Boampong into Skype, and it shows his full name, Seth Boampong Wiradou. According to his Skype account, he lives in the Russian city of Novgorod. News articles show he moved there in 2008. Records show he owns a translation service based in Novgorod and works as an English tutor. We access Wiradou's tax forms, which reveal that by June 2019, he had obtained Russian citizenship. And we find that the man we link to this campaign has been on the radar of other news organizations. In 2020, CNN revealed that a Russian company called the Internet Research Agency, or the IRA, hired people in Nigeria and Ghana to post politically inflammatory content ahead of the US elections. The person in charge of the campaign was Seth Wiradou.
How long have you been working for the IRA, for the troll factory?
What troll factory?
In St. Petersburg, Russia. So,
well, I don't know what IRA is, so I can't say that I'm working for IRA.
According to a US government investigation, the Internet Research Agency was heavily involved in Russian interference in the 2016 US presidential election.
These operations constituted, quote, active measures, a term that typically refers to operations conducted by Russian security services aimed at influencing the course of international affairs.
We know that Russia was able not only to get information into the American public sphere in 2016, but to get people to change their behavior offline as well. We do know that because of Russian disinformation, people showed up for protests, tangible behavior that was caused by Russian interference in the election process.
Despite denying involvement with the Internet Research Agency, Wiredu appeared in a film that is linked directly to the Russian troll factory. The action film, called Tourist, tells the story of Russian military operatives in the Central African Republic. Their task is to prevent a coup from taking place.
Сейчас на Банги идет около 2000 бойцов. Кроме того, во многих городах у нас есть свои люди. Так что помешать нам некому.
Wiredu plays the role of Maxim, a preacher who is helping the coup plotters.
А что по поводу русских? Что говорить о русских? Они просто обучают местную армию. Я уверен в нашей победе. В вашей победе.
The film is funded by the Wagner Group, a private military company with close ties to the Russian government, and headquartered in St. Petersburg. Wagner was founded by the same man who started the Internet Research Agency, Yevgeny Prigozhin. Prigozhin died in a suspicious plane crash in 2023 after challenging Russia's President Putin.
When Prigozhin passed, the first thing that happened was Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, made direct contact to Central African Republic, Mali, and the other African countries where Wagner plays a key role, that although Prigozhin is passed, our foreign policy remains the same, everything stays the same, and it's business as usual.
Prigozhin built up this huge empire of information and military assets, and that's been absolutely taken over by the Kremlin at this point. And the geopolitical ambitions are very much the same.
For Russia, as well as France, local media have been an important aspect of their geopolitical ambitions. Both countries need the media to get support from the population, but the way they use it is different.
France needs to keep the local media under its control. Why would you create this operation when you have the biggest newspaper in the country, when you finance the major TVs in the country, or stuff like that, when you finance the universities in the country?
The Russians will stage propaganda, and it will be obvious you can see that this is propaganda. With France, it's not actually propaganda, but it's actually done through the proper state media.
It's much more institutionalized, but it's still the same.
Quand je regarde la manière dont les articles sont conçus et que je fais un recul, il y a même pas de, il y a presque plus de doute.
They all have the same agenda, really. Influence.
On est vraiment tombé dans un piège énorme.